All right, everybody, welcome back to the arena. Today we have Chelsea Linge. Chelsea was in business to business sales for 10 years, corporate career, and is now a determined business leader focused on transformational coaching through holistic health and self-love. Chelsea, first of all, thank you for being here. We appreciate you and your time. Why don't we start with who is Chelsea Linge?
Yay. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. Happy Friday. I'm so excited to spend some time with you two. Well, that's a big question. I am someone who has learned a lot of things the hard way and started down a very different path than what was expected for me in life. So I was born into a very, very strict religion, in which it was expected that the women get married very young, start having children, and there wasn't a lot of wiggle room for that. There was no one that I saw in my community who was any women that were going to college, pursuing careers, anything of that nature. So, being who I am, I knew from a very young age that wasn't for me, but I didn't know what my options were. And I found a way out from that through sales. I got my first sales job when I was 20 years old, and that turned out to be something that I had kind of a natural knack for. So at the age of 21, I got my first apartment and left the religion behind and jumped into the unknown, having no idea what was in front of me. I had $700 to my name and just I'll figure it out attitude. And what ended up happening from that was, after coming from a world of a lot of restriction and can'ts, I was bound and determined to explore my curiosity and try almost anything that was put in front of me. And what ended up happening over the course of my 20s was I became more and more successful in my sales career. And I was finding that outside experiences weren't actually leading to more happiness for me. And so what that looked like, was a lot of partying, going to Burning Man, doing things like that, going on big international trips, and still not knowing who I was or where this was all heading, what the point of it was when I put my head down on my pillow at night. And I had that knowing in, we can use the word gut, intuition, soul, whatever word aligns best, from pretty early on in my sales career. And this all culminated, I had the passion I had outside of sales was fitness. So starting in my mid-20s, I became a fitness instructor, and that led to CrossFit and barbell training. And basically what ended up happening is I had the way I think about it is the universe is always speaking to us. Sometimes it knocks or gently taps on your shoulder. And if you're not listening, it hits you upside the head with a 2x4. So I had my 2x4 moment in 2020. I lived alone in San Francisco. My community completely was decimated by the pandemic. I spent more time by myself than I ever had. And I found myself down a place of a lot of suffering. A lot of big binge and restrict cycles around food, abusing alcohol at that point, and I had a moment where I realized that I could not continue in that path. And so from there, life started to shift very rapidly. And where you've met me at today is about, 5 years later. I've co-founded a company called Becoming the Bridge. What we do is we work with conscious leaders, and we help lead people back to their hearts. And we believe that path to outer success is found through going inward. So I'm not entirely sure. Everyone wants to put, people generally ask this question, they're talking about labels. I don't really know what my label is. Coach might be the closest thing, but I'm also, breathwork and Reiki facilitator, healer, ceremonialist. And the closest thing that I can come to is I've just been calling myself the big sister. And what I mean by that is the big sister for me, and I'm the oldest of 7 children, is someone who loves you fiercely, and doesn't let you get away with shit. So that's kind of the role that I've been playing in our masterminds that we run, our retreats, and all our different experiences. That's where you're meeting me at today. Hello.
Have all your sisters left the religion, or whatever you'd like to call it, as well?
7 children in my family, and 3 of us have left. 4 stayed in. All 3 that left were sisters. Well, were the girls, I should say. And kind of the cool thing about that is that we're still all very, very close. So we decided, we wanted to be family more than we wanted to be right about what happened, after death, and the way that we wanted to live our lives here. So I call us like a blended family, but it means something different to us than it does to most people.
And then, at least, I mean, we went through a whole arc of different lives, if you will. Throughout that whole period, what's been the most challenging part of your journey? Whether it was leaving, your the religion behind, whether it's stepping into a new life, whether it was leaving corporate, like what was just the most challenging period of life for you?
That is such a good question. You're right. There's a lot of arc there. Gave us a lot of jumping off points. I think continually the most difficult thing, which I am getting better at, is trusting my intuition when it is speaking to me. What I've learned is that, like throughout this time period, like for example, I was on SSRIs for like 15 years. I've been off of them now for 7 or 8. I thought that I was dealing with like issues like depression, like anxiety. I realize now in hindsight, and I can't say this is true for everyone, this is true for me, that what I was actually experiencing was a really, really loud inner voice that was telling me that I was living my life in misalignment. But since I couldn't see certainty or a clear path in front of me, I wasn't able to trust it. And as I've gotten older and have leaned into trust more and more, I'm able to catch those signs sooner, even if they don't make sense to me at the time, even if I don't see certainty in front of me. Because like when I think about like the low moments that I've experienced in my life, the low points came from ignoring that voice, first, like trying to push it down, pretending it didn't exist, not wanting what it was telling me to be true. And what happens is not that the voice gets quieter or settles down. It becomes so loud that it's the only thing that I could hear. And that's been true for me over and over. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, I think we're both nodding. We talk a lot about having lived seasons of life where we've felt misaligned. And, for me, what comes up is part of these like stories or chapters in your life going from $700 in the bank account to being in enterprise business-to-business sales, which is a lucrative role, especially if you're doing it for 10 years, that would insinuate success. And now having moved into leading your own business from the ground up, right? And I'm just curious, the parallel between like sort of like the life discovery side of things with your relationship with money. How has that really evolved or play a role in sort of the evolution of your life?
This is like one of my favorite topics, and I feel like we could jam on this all day. I think money is like a relationship, just like anything else. Like if you and I are friends, we have a relationship, and we're going to stay in the relationship if it feels good. Romantic relationship. We all have a relationship with money, and most of us take the same relationship that we were programmed with as a child, and then we run with it for the rest of our life and think, oh man, this is just the way that it is. I didn't grow up with any form of, like, financial security was not a thing in our household. I was a free lunch kid, if you're familiar with that term. And what I learned throughout my life is that, so I think the game of being a human, is the game of becoming more free. Like, people often think of like personal development and stuff as like an addition of things that they'll add, and I think of it as a game of subtraction. We're removing any blockers, any conditioning, any little tangly threads that are keeping us from being really free. And so I did find success in enterprise sales, but there was also some form of upper limit on it for me, right? And that wasn't due to ability. That was due to just finding, like, you've heard of, like, I think it's called like the thermostat theory, something like that. Don't quote me on it, but definitely check it out. But the idea is that, like, we all have like a point up to which we feel comfortable. And once we reach that ceiling, which has nothing to do with anything external and everything to do with internal, we will begin to self-sabotage or do things that allow us to stay within our comfortable thermostat range. So one of the things that I did a couple of years ago, as I was earlier on in building my business, was I worked with a money coach for a couple of years. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I worked with a money coach for a couple of months, and I began to like really deep dive into my money story. Because what I realized was, all throughout my 20s, I kept saying, like, once I have X, I will feel safe. And it wasn't a conscious thing. But what happened is I reached X and I still didn't feel safe. And I knew that was true because of the way that my relationship to money. I would want to bring money in, but I would feel really uncomfortable when money would go back out. So I spent some time really untangling this, and where I landed with money is, like, I view it now to be a form of energy, just like anything else. And so the way that energy circulates is it's an exchange, kind of like waves in the ocean. Like, if waves only went in the ocean, I don't know what would happen from a scientific standpoint, but we're going to go ahead and say it wouldn't be good. But the way that waves go in and waves go back out, and like when we think of even the word circulate, like the origin is the word circle. And so I spent a couple of years, I spent some time really starting to untangle these threads, and it's been so cool to be able to see like active disprogramming, unprogramming, unlearning of programming in my life. And actually where I ended up going with all that is last year my husband and I became financially independent. When my definition of that is that our investments throw off each month more than we need to live, which from like I guess from that standpoint, it just means we might be able to use the word retirement. But it means that we have freedom to choose how we spend our time, to say yes or no to projects, and really only follow things that light us up. So that's been a little bit of the journey around money. Was, yes, finding success, but then also realizing that I'd reached the limit of where my thermostat was set and having to go back, fiddle with the back of the thermometer and reset it to a higher limit.
And so what role did that play in terms of your journey with your business? Because I know in my short experience, a lot of people will tie what you charge for your service towards what you feel you're worth and self-worth. And so I'm just curious, as it relates to your relationship with money, as it evolved, how did it also evolve your business? Whether it's services, whether it's what you charge for them, where you're like, oh my God, I've been underselling in the story. I've been telling myself, I hear this a lot as well. I just want to make it affordable to everybody. I want everybody to be able to, I think I hear that quite a bit. And so I'm just curious how that journey was for you.
Yeah, well, I think especially in like the spiritual space, maybe we call it personal development, whatever the terminology is that might best encapsulate that. There is almost like opposite poles of a magnet between people who are like working with people's like spirituality and emotions and money, and there's like seems to be somewhat of a disconnect. And it's interesting, right? Because I think you hit right on the head. Like it's, I don't even know if it's what we're worth, but it's what our nervous system can handle, right? We can't outsell the amount that our nervous system is capable of running through, like energetically. And so what might work for, like, two people might be doing the same exact thing, and one person can't. One person is charging 10 times the amount. And to me, that just says that that person has cultivated a lot of safety inside their body, and that they have this relationship with money where they understand it to be just an exchange. And so that's honestly it's so interesting. We're just talking with a client about this yesterday, where she had a number in mind, but the number just scared the crap out of her when she thought about charging it. And, you know, I think that's a perfect example of, you know, oftentimes we think of like strategies outside of ourselves and how, you know, what we need to do. Here's 3 simple steps to start charging more. But I always bring it back to creating safety in the body. And the way that I think that we actually are able to do that over time is when there's resonance between our minds, our hearts, and our nervous systems. Our mind, you know, knows the vision and where we're going and is able to identify beliefs. The heart has to be able to feel the emotion. Like, you can't feel scarce and charge high prices. You need to be tapped into gratitude and abundance. And your nervous system needs to be well regulated enough to be able to go out there and confidently say that. And once we're able to achieve coherence across those 3 areas, then I think that people should charge whatever it is that they want to charge, and the market will tell them if that is a good price for them or not.
I see a lot of, I think just dialogue and conversation pieces around this idea that moving out of a sort of 9-to-5 lifestyle into then running your own business is in some ways perceived as this pursuit of freedom that you described. I think what gets lost in that is just how much work it takes to actually stand up that business and actually build out that energy source that you referred to for money. And so I'm curious, like, as you've made that sort of transition, clearly you feeling called to sort of go in that direction, and I would assume in pursuit of more and more freedom. How do you think about your life now versus what your life could be if you were still in B2B sales? Now, I'm also realizing that there's context here of you've reached this financial independence, but you're still choosing to run a business and launch a business as of this year, right? So I guess, like, how do you compare the two there?
Just to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking like what life might look like if I had stayed in B2B sales. Is that accurate?
I guess, like, today, where you're at in life, why run a business versus be in sales because of the pros and cons between the two? You know, I think one offers one sense of security, the other one maybe offers another sense of security in its own way.
Totally. Okay. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down there, and I'm going to answer, and then let me know if this is what you're talking about. So what I heard you say is that a lot of people go into entrepreneurship because they're actively seeking freedom. Yes, and honestly, with where I sit now, I don't view my own entrepreneurial path as a path that is like freedom is the number one thing. So when I think of my overall values, freedom is the top value, but entrepreneurship for me is actually an expression of creativity, or it's just an expression of myself. It's an expression of what I want to see in the world that I didn't see elsewhere. And what you touched on is so true. You said, you know, lots of entrepreneurs, they are working their butts off. And yeah, I work more than probably most of my friends who have 9-to-5 jobs. Here's the difference. Without speaking generalities, the difference is that that's what I want to do when I wake up in the morning. When I get to the end of my day, at this point in my career, and it's required a lot of roadblocks, left turns, figuring out that was not like I nailed it on the first try or the 10th try. When I get to the end of my day, I feel energized and excited. To me, it feels like a puzzle to be solved. And so when I think of it through that lens, like for me, working on the thing that I want to create is giving me fuel. It's something where it's an output of energy, but it's also an input of energy. So I do this. Freedom is a maybe it's a little further down the list in my why do this now. And when I think about staying in B2B sales, or sales in general, one thing that's coming through for me is just every single person's path is going to be different. And so what works for me may not work for anyone else, and I can only speak to my N of one. And I think that's often where entrepreneurship gets a little skewed for people, where people are like, this is definitely the path and it's superior to working in a 9-to-5. And I don't think that's true whatsoever. One of the things that has led me to where I'm at today is my mom even told me at one point, she was like, "Jill, honey," and she meant it ha ha, but she was like, even as a little girl, you were pretty discontent. So for me, it was just a driving force that I was trying to find some form of inner contentment, inner peace, inner satisfaction. If I was someone who was making, enterprise sales money while working, by the time I was done, I worked 10 hours a week. It was, it was laughable how little it was. And then went on to fulfill my creativity and my passions outside of that. I would have. When I think of the path of and the word easier here might it might not be the perfect word, but that path does sound like the path that might have fewer roadblocks, a little less resistance in it, but it just wasn't the path for me, because for me it was all bound up in creativity and the expression of what I wanted to see in the world. And I'm wondering if that's true for either of you, as you guys are also obviously very creative people who are birthing projects into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I like your point on creativity. I never really thought of it that way, but for me personally, that was something I was missing completely in my last job. I do think freedom at this point, I mean, I've been doing this for a year, so keep that in mind. I would say freedom is pretty high on the list of why I left and what I've enjoyed. I mean, that to say, like you said, Chelsea, I mean, it's been very difficult. I do think this is a more difficult path because there is a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty is inherently uncomfortable. But the ability, I've worked more, yep, which I didn't think was going to happen, but I have worked more. But the difference is I get to work when I want, where I want. So it just felt like for me in corporate, I was working from these hours to these hours, generally speaking, put down the laptop and work on, you're not touching on the weekend. And here it's I'll work weekends, but it's because I want to. And I just feel and if I feel logging off a little bit early today, well, I can do that. It's given me the freedom to work from, I would say, just a place of maximum capacity, maximum energy, because I'm always listening to myself, listening to my body. If I'm a little bit tired, well, I'll take it a little bit easier that day. When I feel ready to go, I might start cold calling just because I feel like it, and I'll work the extra hour just because. So I do think, at least for me, freedom, it has been more free, but maybe in a different way than someone would traditionally expect when you think entrepreneurship. Like we were talking about earlier, I think people think, oh, I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. I can do whatever I want then. And I've been more disciplined than I've ever been since I left my corporate job, because I have no safety net. there were days in corporate where I'd wake up at 8:30 a.m. I knew I was getting a paycheck, didn't really feel like work, and kind of just did everything that I felt I had to do, and then logged off. I can't really afford to do that as an entrepreneur. So I'm up earlier than I've ever been. I'm more structured than I've ever been. But again, I see the bigger purpose. There's a bigger, grander purpose behind what I'm doing. I'm doing it, to have an impact. And so that's kind of what I would say. My shorter experience, if you will.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, I also really appreciated how you were just like, I'm going to put freedom over here, and we're going to talk about creative expression. And it seems like, to your point, everybody has maybe their own or different pursuits for like what their why is. I think I love that you did that, only because I tend to conflate the two, between shifting to entrepreneurship with a automatic pursuit for freedom, but like I also think about this as like, well, I know entrepreneurs in my life who are less free than I am, and so that's where I've started to really think more deeply about, like, I think it's more important, what are you doing every day? How do you feel when you're doing those things? And also, who do you surround yourself with in that process? And for some people, they might have to make some sort of pivot in their environment, and would probably have to just start there. And I think it's as simple as that in some ways. I don't think it's as black and white as like, well, if you want to love what you do and you want freedom and you want to, enjoy who you're with, then go the entrepreneurial route or stay in the 9-to-5. And I think that's where more recently in my life, I started to really like conflate the two in a more binary sense of like, well, one path is this and the other path is that. I like how you kind of positioned it as like, well, everybody's going to be a little bit unique in terms of like what their needs are and how their current day-to-day serves them.
Totally. So what you really hit on there just like resonates with me so much, which is like, there is nuance to almost everything. We can't really speak to most things in black and white. And so like the answer to most questions is, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on who you are. And I also heard you hit on like, there are lots of entrepreneurs out there who they're working a ton, and it's not in the pursuit of creative expression or joy. It's just a different path to earning an income. And so it always depends on the specifics of the individual we're talking to and what lights them up and what they are willing to do in order to be lit up.
I will say, I do think there's something beautiful about just like an exchange of value. The first coaching client I ever got was the most rewarding. I remember just like, I was like so genuinely fulfilled and happy. And it was like a minuscule amount of money. I'm talking like way under what I ever have sold outside of that. But it was just so cool because it was like, wow, this person trusts me, believes in me to work with them. And like, I never take that for granted. And there's something really unique about, I appreciate being able to say like, yeah, I work for, people ask, who do you work for? And there's just that thing of like, well, you must work for somebody. It's like, oh, I work for myself. It's like, oh, wow, that's cool. It's like, yeah, that is pretty cool. Like, I'm really proud because it hasn't been easy. It has not been easy, Or they're like, oh, I work for Purposely Present Coaching and Consulting. Oh, what's that? Like, who's that? It's like, oh, it's me. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. But Chelsea, you mentioned you work with conscious leaders. So my question to you is, now, are they already conscious when they're coming to you? Or are you getting them conscious? Are you helping them become more conscious or taking them to the next level? Like, how does that process look?
Oh, that is such a good question. I want to just like reflect back really quickly when you're talking about this first client you had, which, what an adorable story. I love it so much. And it hits on something that's so important, which is like when you're in this space, like in coaching and such, like we're all mirrors for each other. And so anytime you're working with someone, on some level, they're also working on you, right? You can't be in close dynamic relationship with someone and be unaffected completely on like an energetic, whatever level by this other person. So it sounded like what I heard you say, even though I don't think you said it in so many words, is that you gained a lot of confidence in yourself by being like, oh my gosh, this person put their trust in me. And that helps you like take the next rung on the ladder as you continue to build your business.
You nailed it. That's why you're a coach.
That's so cool. Okay, back to the first question. I think it's a bit of a spectrum. I don't think that someone would end up working with me if they didn't fall into some level of awareness, because they wouldn't have ever been intrigued or interested enough to have reached out to me in the first place, right? And the idea is through the process of working together that they move into more awareness or greater awareness, and that has positive ripple effects out into their behaviors, their inner world, their outer world, their lives, and their communities. But I think there's a certain threshold of, someone has to already have that small knowing, that inner voice that, I was referencing earlier, where they're like, maybe I'm not entirely sure what this chick is talking about, but I want to know just a little bit more and decide whether that's for me. So that's kind of the way I think about it. If you made it in the front door or even knocked at the door, you're already right on your track.
So what would you say are like when we say like consciousness and awareness, like what are some of the like top 3 or key things that people are becoming more aware of when they work with somebody of your expertise?
I'm just going to give you one, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I defaulted to like 3, but if there's 10 or 1, by all means.
I think what it comes at the root of everything is this idea that we all have our own unique medicines, that we are here on this planet to serve ourselves, our families, and our communities. And the more that we can become free of any internal blockers that are keeping us from tapping into that natural state of humanness, which is love and abundance and trust, the more that we can tap into that medicine. And so when I think of it through that lens, all that I'm ever helping someone do is cultivate their own medicine. And then so they can turn around, go back out into the world and serve it on a really large scale. And medicine could be anything, right? It could be within your family unit, showing up as like a really loving, conscious parent. It could be, leading hundreds, thousands, millions of people on international stages and in big companies. And it's the belief that every single person has that. Every single person has that. There's not one person who came to this planet who does not have their own version of the medicine. It's just, what is the person in front of me, and how do we help them tap into that in a really big way?
Are you familiar with the Course in Miracles?
I have it on my downstairs coffee table right now.
So I haven't read that, but I am reading Return to Love, which is Marianne Williamson's take about the Course in Miracles, and I just feel like what you shared is just so in line with everything that book preaches, which is love. I guess, what does freedom mean to you? It's been a big word. What does it mean to be free? And as from your perspective, you've gained more freedom internally. How has that showed up, in your day-to-day life and in the way you feel as you move through, this crazy journey of life?
To call back to Marianne Williamson first, I'm not even going to try to do the quote, but one of her quotes is something about our greatest fear is not that we are.
Chelsea, I end every single keynote I deliver with that quote.
Oh,
I could read it to you right now, like this. I know the whole thing.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. I can't recite it,
Me too.
But the first time I heard it, like my whole body lit up with chills, and I was like, this is a North Star for me. This speaks to the way that my heart understands things. What does freedom mean? It means choice. It means that, and I don't just mean like on a big scale. Like, I don't mean like, am I an entrepreneur? Am I in sales? It's like in our day-to-day lives and in each moment. And like an example of this, a lot of people, there are many people who are walking around and they're being owned by their triggers and the things that, the behaviors that they don't feel are aligned with who they want to be as a human. But they're also not recognizing or are unable to tap into, at this point in their journey, the choice in each moment. And so when we are able to reintroduce choice, then we always have the choice to choose love, right? Comes right back to that same thing, which is what is our unique medicine that is in alignment with love, trust, and abundance. And we get to have choice in each moment to return to love. So I think of freedom as, on a grand scale, it's, things like time freedom, location freedom, all of those things. But it comes down also to like our day-to-day lives. If someone does something that I don't agree with, do I have freedom in that moment to choose love and to still go on and have a really good day without allowing that to kind of hijack my experience, right? That's the kind of freedom that then allows us to build into a larger state of the bigger things like money and time and all those other things. I'm curious if that aligns with the way either of you think about freedom.
Yeah, totally. Move from the heart. I'd say wherever, to me, that freedom is love. Like, they are pretty synonymous in my experience. The more I move from a place of love, the more free I generally feel. In the areas, it's very obvious where I am still lacking a little bit of freedom because there's a resistance or there's still a little bit of fear, there's hesitation to show up as a version of myself or wherever it might be. So I think freedom and love to me are very synonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think specifically like choosing love as an energy, I think reframed or like thought of differently would be, would you let this circumstance, whatever it is, rob you of your peace? And I think we have a choice. There's a good book called Letting Go that I think about, but like our ability to really like let go and not let external circumstances in the world around you dictate sort of how you feel. It's kind of where my mind goes, but it's all pretty similar, I think.
Yeah. I think you hit on something really important here. Like, the way we operate in like Western society is we're like, as a whole, when I get the house or the fit body or the whatever, then I will be happy. But to me, like the way I think about things is like, wherever you go, there you are. And so I care less about like your fancy car or house, whatever. I want to know, like, how does your Tuesday morning feel? Like, are you stoked on your Tuesday morning? To me, that's freedom, right? And until we like start to be more concerned about what our Tuesday morning feels like, whatever. Just like a regular day. Like, only from that place can we even begin to enjoy the other external things. And that kind of feels like a little bit of an extension of what you're touching on there.
I guess, and I don't know if I have this like question fully fleshed out in my head, but I think the thing that we run into or like struggle with is that we do enjoy, like there's joy, whether it's brief or not, that comes from, the acquisition of something material, like a house, a car, an experience. And it almost begs this question of like, where do we draw the line? Like, what are we supposed to enjoy? Like, I want to live a life where I enjoy things, but I also don't want to attach any sort of, I don't want to become less free because of my desires to pursue joy. So it's sort of this like complicated, messy ball in my head where I'm trying to like parse out, like, there are things that I enjoy doing, but I have to actively choose to like do things necessary to be able to unlock that. And sometimes the things that I have to do that are necessary are not necessarily congruent to like the things that would make me most free, right? I'll give you an example, right? So I'm a sales coach. And like Matt said, like you said, like pouring into somebody, helping them grow, helping people is something that I find to be like one of the best feelings ever. I'm brought to tears of joy when somebody promotes and they tell me how much I've meant to their life. And so like that deepened impact, that meaningful relationship I've built is something I would love to do. But being a sales coach in a W-2, like, I have to make certain sacrifices. It comes with other things. So that's an example of just like, I want to do the things that bring me joy. Sometimes they come with extra stuff. Or it's like, I enjoy these experiences, but in order for me to acquire those experiences or those materials or what have you, I need to do the things to make the money to get there. Right? And like sometimes my means of making that money don't actually align with freedom. So I think that's where it gets like complicated. And I'm wondering if I'm making any sense, and if I am, if you can help sort of sort this out with your coaching expertise.
May I clarify to make sure I'm understanding you correctly?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that the things that help you feel really free in your life. There are other parts that they're like more foundational pieces that provide like stability, financial resources and such that uphold your ability to do these other things. So you have this like you've kind of like created almost like maybe mental buckets in your life of things that you find enjoyment and freedom in, and then the other things that are means to an end. Am I tracking so far?
Yeah, I guess I can simplify it. The pursuit of enjoyment is a pursuit in of its own. And I'm curious to what extent you allow a sacrifice of freedom if it means pursuing joy.
I'm pursuing love. I'll tell you that. I think there's a difference between enjoyment and love.
Okay, love, right? Like if you're pursuing love, to what extent are you willing to sacrifice, or to what extent may it, or should we allow to, or do you guys believe that you can achieve this full life of love without any sacrifices to freedom or sacrifices to other values that you care about?
Okay. Can we start with picking apart the question just a little bit? What I heard you say is that there's a pursuit of freedom, a pursuit of enjoyment, pursuit of insert thing that feels good here. So when I think about the word pursuit, it means that I'm chasing after and it's not already here. And I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said like happiness, like the pursuit of happiness, something along those lines.
Like pursuing a feeling of joy.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think of joy as something that we achieve or pursue. I think of joy as a practice. And so what that means to me, and it's kind of answering it's a little bit like a roundabout way to answer your question. What that means to me is that there are lots of times in life where the things that we're doing are things that are foundational steps to us getting to where we want to go. And we can recognize that there's something that we may not want to do long term, but they are right here in front of us right now. And so the way I think about that is, how can I practice joy in these moments and in these activities? And a question that often comes to mind for me in this is, how can I 2x my pleasure right here? And I'll give you an example. So I went through this like little like thought experiment where I was like, I'm not gonna do anything that I don't find joy in for a couple of days and see how that feels to me. And so I was running up against this problem where I was like, how do I do the dishes? The dishes need to be done. Like, they're not like in my, wow, this is, freedom and excitement for me box, but the dishes still have to get done, right? And so I was like a little bit stumped. I'll spare you like the in-between process here, but basically what I ended up coming to was realizing that any and everything that is in honor of the greater good of what I'm doing is something that I can ceremonialize, and it's something that I can use to practice feeling the ways that I want to feel, which are joy, abundant, gratitude. And so when I was able to then slow down I just gotta get the dishes done, and like really slow it down and like notice the way like the warm water felt on my hands, and notice like the way the bubbles glistened in the sink, and how maybe the way that I'd created a pattern around it hadn't brought me joy, but I also very much value a clean home. And so to me, when I slowed it down and I was able to intentionally find things within the activity that I could practice joy on, practice gratitude for, then suddenly I'm not in pursuit of anything. It's already here, and I'm just noticing it. And that's the same way that I think about almost all this stuff, is that if we're thinking about things as like, how do I get through them as fast as I can because I don't want to do them? It's I speak in generalities here, and of course it's not, I'm not going to say that it applies to every single situation. But then what we're doing is we're increasing our suffering in that moment, because we're stated to ourselves that this is something that we don't want to do and we're not happy doing it. And so what I would ask you is, in these moments where the thing you're doing is in pursuit of the greater good, but it may not be something that you want to be doing long term, and that's okay. How can you 2x your joy in that activity?
I love that, because that's kind of just like this idea that joy is really a choice versus a destination to pursue.
Yeah. 100%.
That's kind of what I mean. You articulated it much better than I probably would have, but I was going to say I view joy. I can generate joy through perspective right here, right now, because I just zoom out. I'm like, damn, dude, 3 years ago you would have freaking killed. Like, hell yeah. I mean, I could leave see it. Like, I could literally, and so it really is a choice to perspective. I even think about when I do some outreach where I'm literally just copying and pasting emails. I'm like, man, this is kind of boring. Like, god dang. But now, sometimes I'll throw on some music, and I'll just freaking jam out while I'm doing that thing. Copy, paste, or have March Madness on in the back. I'm good. Like, we're chilling, So I think you beautifully articulated that. And everyone needs to go back. I'm gonna, you know what? I never do this, but I may go back and listen to that answer again. It was that well articulated.
Yeah, and everything I've learned, I feel like I've learned the hard way. So like, don't think that I just like cracked the code on this first try. But Matt, you and I were talking about sales beforehand, and I freaking love sales because it is what we're talking about. It's like, I have found the joy in inviting people into the world that I'm creating. And when I think of it through that lens, oh my gosh, I'm sending out invites left and right. And people, the energy you put out is the energy that people respond to. I mean, one of the clients that I signed recently, cold outbound. I am so honored that you reached out to me and thought of me for this. Can we set up a call? Set up a call, closed her. And then we recognize that, if we tell the stories we tell ourselves then become our reality. So I
I love that because like being in the sales world for as long as I have now, it's like it can be such a toxic environment and people can be in such a like bad place. But how can two things be true at once, right? Like how can you be in a sales environment and be thriving? How can you be in a sales environment and be like depressed, right? And I think that's evidence enough to where it's like it's really comes down to like the energy you're putting into it, why you're doing it, and it feeling in alignment to your greater purpose. So yeah, I really love how we kind of just like used that environment and said, you know, it's sort of like looking at it with two different perspectives.
Yeah. We're often like,
Sorry, I would say one of the easiest little shifts, I don't know, that I do that really catches people off guard, I think, in most cases, is you get on the phone with somebody, it's your first time speaking to them, and you've obviously, you know, in most cases I've done some cold outreach, so they don't really know who I am. They've seen my LinkedIn profile, but say, hey, Matt, you get the classic, how are you? And I think most people, good, how are you? And that's what usually, I'll be like, hey, like, how's it going? And they're like, good, how are you? And I'm like, and I will actually give a real answer. Like, you know what? The weather is beautiful in Chicago today. Yesterday it was snowing, but today we got 50, we got sunny, so life's good over here. I'm watching some March Madness. And you just give them a human answer, and then I'll say, oh, well, how about you? Even though they've already briefly told me. And then you'll get such a different response. Where I think when you kind of open up to them first and just create a little bit of like maybe safety or like humanization, they just give like actual responses. I actually will learn a little bit more about their day. And so I feel like that's just a little quick shift that I haven't really realized maybe that I've always done. But the more I think about it, I'm like, oh, this is like a great little sales tool. And it's not even sales. It's just building a relationship. Anyway, no question there. I don't know. I felt kind of called to say that. MD, you got any questions before we wrap up?
No, I think you made a good point on like it goes back to Chelsea's point of like the energy you put in. Like you can have that same interaction with a barista. It doesn't have to be in a sales tool or tactic or environment. It can be just how you interact with people generally. So it's broader.
All right, Chelsea, we got one last question for you. First of all, thank you. You've been great. I really appreciate your time. To end this, what are you most proud of in life?
What am I most proud of in life? I'm most proud of the times that I've chosen to return to love, and that has looked like a lot of different things. One of those things was quitting drinking. But every single time that I recognize my conditioning and patterns that don't align with love, and even if it's a simple thing on a small day, on a regular Tuesday, and I choose a new path forward that aligns with love, I feel most proud of that. That's what I came to this planet to do, was to love myself and others fiercely and help others do the same. So that begins with practicing it myself.
Wow. What an answer. I love that. Chelsea Linge, right? Did I get it?
You got it.
Chelsea Linge, everybody. Chelsea, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.